Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, and welcome again to Legal Matters, the program that's been designed to address critical issues facing consumers and businesses today, legal information, practical solutions, and straight talk about a wide variety of topics that affect your home and work life. We welcome once again from Odette Bazar, Grasso law firm in East Providence, Jackie Grasso and David Bazar. Debbie. Today, our topic is gun laws. Recently, local shootings are daily headlines here in Rhode Island, in Mass, and of course, Aurora, Colorado's theater mass killing was national headline news for more than a week. Today's Providence Journal cites that there are 43 shootings in Rhode Island's capital city as of June 3rd. Obviously, there's much controversy about the debate about gun control continues. The question of whether or not violence and that kind of debate has ever made a difference is our topic for today. We know that it's understandably an emotional debate, so today what we're going to do is try to have our lawyers present information that's reasonable, a reasonable exchange on what the facts are, Rhode Island, Mass, and what do we do if we want to carry guns. So there is a constitutional right to bear arms. Yeah.
There is both in the federal Constitution, I guess Article 2, and in Rhode Island, the state Constitution in Article 1, Section 22 has a statement that says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Massachusetts, I'm sure, has a similar provision in their state Constitution.
So in Rhode Island, what's the law about how those guns actually get issued, and what about Mass? How does this happen?
Well, you all start with filing an application for a license. That's true in any state, I believe. You have to apply for a license. There's a waiting period, I believe, about 7 days.
Right. This is the permit to buy the firearm.
Purchase.
Right.
Then they do a background check. A copy of the permit or license goes to local law enforcement where the gun is being purchased, your state attorney general's office, and then the seller has to keep a copy on file for 6 years.
So in Rhode Island, there's a slight difference between a rifle or shotgun and a handgun. You have to be 21 to buy the handgun, 18 to buy a rifle. And the permitting process, I guess, is similar. And Jackie's right. You apply to buy it. The seller sends out the background check. They have to wait the 7 days until, I think, noon, the 7th day or whatever it is. And then if you pass the background check, you can buy the weapon. The issue is, can you then carry it? That's the next step in the process.
Who might be denied the application? I guess if you were a convicted felon, would probably get a no.
Somebody who is declared insane. Someone who's being treated for drug abuse, someone who's being treated for drunkenness.
What about our undocumented?
Well, you have to be a legal citizen.
Yes, of course, yes.
Resident alien, documented
alien,
alien, as Roberto would say.
Yeah.
But there is also, in Rhode Island, they have this, I guess, the National Rifle Association calls them shall issue states or may issue states. Rhode Island is a shall issue state, they say. However, there is some language in the law that allows the police chief in the town where you apply to look at it, and certainly the attorney general to say, what is the purpose? Why do you need the gun?
Do you have to have a need, or how about I have an interest in collecting guns? I have an interest in learning how to shoot a gun. Is that not a need in and of itself?
Well, I think that they retain some discretion. And that's the whole idea of this permit, the purpose to carry or have the gun. This is the purpose for the right to carry and to have a permit to carry the gun. A rifle, I don't think you need a permit if you're going to transport it. It just has to be taken apart, not loaded.
Not loaded.
You can't have a loaded weapon in your vehicle. But
the statute says that it has to be for a reasonable purpose or if you have fear for injury of your person. A proper reason, there has to be a proper reason for carrying a pistol, but David's correct. There still is discretion with your local law enforcement agency.
Right. So that's why they call us the hybrid shall, because there's some language that they shall issue it, but this language gives some discretion.
Of course,
on
they
whether
have to be a suitable person, too.
Right.
I mean, getting back to if there's a crime that was committed, if somebody's being treated for drug abuse or
On probation
on
for a
probation,
felony.
yeah.
Well, Providence has been in the news for a young man holding a gun to his mother's head. I don't know, she fried the eggs incorrectly or something, and then somebody else is shooting 3 children. Do these people have permits and they passed muster and ended up getting a gun-carrying permit? How could this happen, that there could be so many people on the street with guns? These are all obviously people who got them illegally?
Could be.
Not
yeah.
necessarily, though. You could go through all the proper route to get the gun. And remember, the permit to purchase and the permit to carry are different. It's really just an application in Rhode Island, as opposed to Massachusetts, where I think you actually have to get a firearm identification card to
Yeah.
purchase it, and then, of course, to carry it. In Rhode Island, you can buy a rifle, you can buy a shotgun, you can buy a handgun, going through the application process, the permit to buy the gun. It's not the permit to carry it. So they could buy it, bring it home, have it in their house legally without needing a permit to carry it, because if it's in the house, you don't need the permit.
What about the machine gun?
That's exempt from the law.
The way I read Rhode Island law, it says that you can't possess a machine gun.
Yeah.
Apparently banks can?
Well, there are certain groups of people who can.
SWAT teams,
Yeah, or law enforcement officials.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder who at the bank is likely to be able to wield this if
The
they
guy
need it.
standing guard outside.
Outside,
Yeah,
that's it.
probably.
With all of this controversy, so many shootings, the NRA has really been very active. Every time there is a shooting, even if it isn't in that state, there is an awful lot of energy put towards making sure that we have the right to carry, to possess. Where is that going with all of this?
It's a strong
mass
lobby. It's a
shooting?
huge lobby, either on the national level and
Yes.
the local level. And anytime there is a movement to curtail gun laws, then you go back to the NRA, which argues that you have the constitutional right to bear arms. And it's a strong lobby. It's a
Right.
strong lobby.
And there are people on both sides of those rights, many of whom will even say on the right to carry rifles, guns, and all of that, what is the necessity of having a weapon that can shoot, X numbers of hundreds of rounds per minute or whatever? There are those who support that position and will give you a reason why, but it's a tougher sell to say that you shouldn't regulate an AK-47 or any other automatic weapon, as opposed to why do we have the right to carry arms and all of that on a individual basis. It is two different arguments, and I think it's a lot harder to make that argument for the automatic weapons.
Well, the NRA always says that guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Right.
Right, and there's
I think
wisdom
it's-
in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the real issue becomes, you talked about the fellow who killed those people in the movie theater. Even the stringent of gun laws may not stop a person who was not in their right mind from doing something like that. The issue is, where might it help? Might it help in some of just the general gun violence that there is in the United States? That's the argument on that side of the
Yes.
issue. And there may be some valid points to that. There's been a long history since Brady got shot with the Brady gun laws and the controls, and how much control will help, what will it do, and what point does it infringe on somebody's constitutional rights?
Comment on this. You mentioned the Dark Knight, the theater shooting, mass killing. A recently elected to the bar in New Haven, Connecticut, a lawyer walks into the theater carrying a gun.
What is it? President of the Bar Association?
Yes,
Was that what it
just
was?
recently elected to the bar.
So why
Association.
did he need to walk into a theater with a gun?
Good question. And of course, it was Dark Knight, the same movie that had happened in Aurora that created that scenario. And our own Dean Esserman from Providence is now their chief out there. But comment on that. He has the right to carry. He understands the law. He feels the need to carry for his own protection. Is that defensible in any way, shape, or form? Walk into the theater with it in your back?
It could
pack,
be
something?
defensible if he followed all the right procedures for being allowed to carry that weapon, and he was going to see a movie where people had been shot and killed in the past and said, yeah, I'm okay, I'm allowed to have this, I'm doing it all properly, and if someone comes into this theater, I'm going to be able to defend myself. I assume that's the defense to what was going on. I don't know the details. I don't know if he did follow all the rules, but if he did...
Well, it's like the case in Rhode Island where a physician went into the hospital carrying a gun.
Right. And for what purpose?
For what purpose? You know, why do you need to carry a gun when you're performing a gastrointestinal procedure?
Right.
He later lost his job, got fired, and whether or not he may have been licensed to carry, but he didn't follow hospital policy. Obviously, can't just walk into a hospital
Which is a
carrying
difference.
And that is a very, do you want to elaborate on it? Because certainly it doesn't make sense that you...
You know, you may be licensed to carry a weapon and you may be authorized to conceal a weapon depending on what the rules are, where you are, and what permits you have and have been allowed to do these things. But there's also, in what context. Your employer has a right to say you cannot bring a weapon to work, even though you have the right to do that, the license to carry it. And I think an employer has the right to say that this is a smoke-free environment and it's a gun-free environment.
Well, just like in the court system.
Right.
We had an attorney many, many years ago who carried a gun to court. I forget what happened, but displayed it, and thus the metal detectors went in, and we can't... You know.
So do lawyers go through the same check and procedures that I do?
We can have a card that we get that says we agree to abide by the rules, and part of the rules are that we're not carrying a gun into court.
And a matter of fact, any law enforcement that goes into the court system has to relinquish the gun. They leave it, they check it in and leave it in a locker, so they can't go into the courtroom with guns. Federal court, though, I mean, the federal marshals carry.
Yeah, they sure, but they're employees, and that's part of what the job is.
Lawyers still can't.
Right. In federal court, lawyers can bring cell phones in, but barely.
Yeah.
Concealed weapons, problem with that at all? Say, for example, this lawyer who went into the New Haven Theater to see Dark Knight, he wasn't really posing any threat, was he? They can say that that's not legal because it's not one of the places that you shouldn't be allowed to carry a gun, but he really wasn't doing anything. It's concealed, and unless someone decided to frisk him, perhaps they might not have even known.
Well, that's my question, is how did they know that he had a weapon? He had to have at least shown it or told somebody about it. How did they know?
Not familiar with the facts, but every state has the right to issue its regulations on whether you can carry, whether it can be concealed on your person, and those different rules. I don't know what the rules are in Connecticut, and I don't know what rules he was following. But, as you said, if he had a right to carry a weapon concealed on his person, then you're right. What harm or risk does that cause, other than he's protecting himself if something should happen? However, if he didn't have the right to carry it, then he violated the law no matter what.
How about from the business person's perspective, the one who wants to sell the guns? Since you can buy them here, no problem about selling them here. Where is the onus on the seller of the gun in terms of to whom, how many, how much ammunition? Is it free reign?
They have to comply with local statutes.
Right.
And going back to the licensing requirement, making sure that there's a background check that's done by local police, sending a copy of the application over to the state attorney general's office, and they have to comply with the law. They just can't willy-nilly give it to anyone.
They have to keep their records for a
6 or
certain
7
period of
years.
time. So there are rules that they have to follow. It's, you know, someone can't come in and say, give me 2 sawed-off shotguns and one, what did you call it, a Saturday night special, and I'll pick them up on Wednesday at 2. You know, no, they have to follow the rules.
Now, what happens at a gun show? By definition, they're there to
Same
sell
thing.
as many as they can, but you have to limit to whom and how many rounds?
They still have to follow the rules.
If you're selling a weapon in Rhode Island, for example, a gun or shotgun or rifle, you have to follow whatever the rules are of the state you're in. I'm sure that that would be the case, that the state police would enforce that. Every state has different rules, so, you know, I'm not really familiar with traveling gun shows and how they work, but
Fair enough.
I would have to assume that if you're selling a gun, you follow the same rules, you have to have the same licensing requirements and all of that.
And if a gun is stolen, is the onus on the owner?
Yes, to report it.
And if a
Right.
gun is stolen from a shop that sells it?
Same thing.
Sure, because they own the gun that's being stolen, and the rules in Rhode Island are that if you have some weapon stolen, you have to report it to the police within 24
Yeah,
hours.
yeah.
Let's talk about that Trayvon Martin case, the young boy who was killed, and there was a story about, gee, he was wearing sunglasses, he was wearing a hoodie, he posed some threat, and that castle law, stand your ground, someone felt threatened. Is that really such a slippery slope as it seems to be? Because, I don't know, at any given moment, who couldn't feel perhaps
It's
threatened?
subjective. That's the problem.
Right.
It's very subjective because you may be in fear of this person, but your next door neighbor may not be in fear of a person. So it's very subjective on how
How do
somebody's
you-
going to interpret
Well, here's what happens in
why.
Rhode Island.
Yeah.
In Rhode Island, if you're in your own home and somebody is breaking and entering in violation of the law, there is a rebuttable presumption that,
Explain.
which I will explain, but the rebuttable presumption is that if somebody is in your home, it's presumed that you feel threatened for your life and that you do not have to therefore retreat. Rebuttable presumption means that the mere facts that set out this situation, that might be someone calling about the gun law right now.
It might be.
The mere fact that you're in your home and that you feel threatened, it's presumed that you are in fact threatened. If the facts can be proved otherwise, you can rebut that presumption. So if the person in your home is some elderly person who's maybe lost and disoriented, and that's what is shown, then that rebuttable presumption goes away, and you no longer have the protection of that statute.
So in other words, the person that's in your home, that enters the home, whether it be forcefully or whatever, that person can use as a defense that they weren't there with the intent to break and
Right.
enter or to harm. Rather,
Gee,
yeah.
how about an estranged husband? I wasn't
Well-
really going to do any harm to her. That sounds like that's a pretty slippery slope
Well,
also.
an estranged husband with a restraining order against him,
Suppose there weren't a restraining order, but there's still
If you're
a
in
little...
fear,
if they don't have the right to be there, if they are in fact violating the law, then the presumption would apply. But if they have a right to be there, you
Still
know,
married, they hadn't been divorced yet. He might have moved out and then came back with, I don't know, a concealed weapon. I don't know. Do you really want? Who wants to take that risk if you're that female, and you know he has a proclivity for less than?
well, there's two different
Kind
things.
behavior.
There's the castle law, as you called it, or stand your ground,
Stand your
the right to not have to retreat in your own home when someone's breaking and entering and violating the law. That may or may not apply in the case if there's no violation of the law and breaking and entering and that type of thing. But there's also the self-defense rule.
yeah,
And you can defend yourself if you feel threatened.
yeah.
So, since this has taken place in Florida, not surprisingly, the Des Moines, Iowa, I believe it's the Register, they were talking about having similar laws to protect those who feel that they need protection. With the number of, I don't know, inner cities who say that there's an awful lot of violence, I think I need to protect myself, which may be perpetuating even more violence. How do you restrict that? How do you manage to keep that under control? Or are there just too many guns on the street, so there's no chance of controlling anything anymore?
Well, I mean, you could use the latter argument, which is there are too many guns, and it's hard to limit them or restrict them, but to keep it under control, you're going to need legislation, you're going to need your local law enforcement to, I guess, pardon the pun, police the laws or, implement the laws.
And you can have legislation that is designed to allow people to have guns, but sort of protect how they're used. The Florida situation was out in the street for somebody who was a neighborhood watch person patrolling the street. I don't know that the stand your ground law would even apply in that case, to be honest with you.
Because?
Because he sort of provoked the encounter himself. And what point did he feel threatened for his life by a kid who apparently had no weapon?
Had the soda can or
Yeah.
something, or Skittles?
It would be a little different if that person entered his home.
That's what I'm
That's a little
saying.
different.
So
So
I'm
in the-
saying,
yeah,
you know, the law perhaps in
It's
the
too
states,
broad?
yeah, it might be too broad if it
Yeah.
allows you to stand your ground out on the street. on a certain circumstance where you're the one who's provoking the encounter.
Maybe another thing you can do is raise the age in which you're able to apply for a license or a permit. Now, it's 21 years for a pistol, but 18 years old for a rifle.
Right.
Just like the drinking laws, so it used to be 18, now 20. Maybe raise the age, I'm not sure. Will that curtail it? It's a thought. It's a thought.
How do you feel about the laws as they are? Do we need better, stronger federal laws?
But then you get into the federal government trying to interfere with the state's right to legislate.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And so personally, if you're asking me, should each state be allowed to regulate things like that? Yeah, I think they should be. Do I think states should perhaps be a little more vigilant about who they're allowing to buy guns and what restrictions they're on? Certainly I do with those automatic weapons. Again, the laws are not going to, I don't think, stop the deranged killer from doing what that person's going to do.
Yeah.
The issue is, will it reduce the number of other violent crimes that happen with guns and take some guns off of the street?
Explain, I was reading in doing this research that once someone applies for a gun and is able to have a gun, that they need to take a course and need to be able to shoot.
Qualify.
And they have to qualify. We're not talking about them needing to be sharpshooters or marksmen or anything, but why is that part of the issue? Is it just because of a safety issue, or is it that they want to make sure if you're going to shoot, you're going to shoot to kill? Is that
well, no,
as
I
a police
think
a little bit of each. I think it's safety.
Massachusetts
Sure.
has that requirement.
Yep.
And you have to go out and show that you have some proficiency with the weapon. And I think the answer to that is not that you're the best marksman in the world, but that you're going to be safe with the gun. It's not just being able to shoot at the target, but there's gun safety issues that I'm sure they look at as they decide whether or not you should be allowed to have the permit to get the gun.
You also have to requalify as well, because the license expires at a point in time. You'd have to go back and requalify.
It would make sense that if a father now owns a gun, takes lessons, learns the safety features, then he's more likely to be responsible about taking the gun apart and not keeping the ammo right next to it, so the inquiring child causes some fatality or mishap.
And we've had that issue, and I think you talked about those traveling gun shows. I think there was also an issue with a child at one of those shows that he shot himself or
His father
somebody.
was a police officer, wasn't he?
I
Chief
don't
of police.
remember all the details, but I remember there was a tragic accident.
Yeah.
And the whole idea about the licensing that you're talking about is a gun safety issue. They want to make sure, yep, you can buy the weapon, but you have to have some proficiency to know how to keep it safe, how to use it safely, how to carry it safely, taken apart, not loaded, all of those types of things.
Other issues that you are aware of that we should discuss here? We've been trying to get a broad brush idea of who can own them and who can't and who should be denied. In this example of this Aurora young man from Aurora, Colorado, he was seeing someone.
And how do they find that out? With HIPAA laws.
Yes. Let's talk about
That's
that
a
little
problem.
bit. It is a problem. Do you want to go through that
Well,
case a
you know,
little
your
bit?
HIPAA laws are your laws that prevent physicians or any medical facility from disclosing the nature of treatment. So how do you find out if somebody's being treated for psychological purposes when you're applying for a permit? Do you sign a consent form that says we can inquire?
Is that on the permit? Is that a question that they're allowed to ask? Because that's certainly an invasion of someone's privacy. Are you seeing a shrink?
Well, it's interesting because the statute says that if you're treating for some psychotic issues or just been released, that's grounds to deny you. So if you don't sign a medical authorization, then how would they know?
Yeah.
So,
but in this case, I don't think they knew about it until after the fact.
Well, I understand. But I guess in general, what I'm saying is perhaps it could be required as part of your application permit to sign medical authorizations that say you can get my medical records. Now, does that then require you to tell them who you've treated with so that they can get those records?
And how far do you go?
Exactly. How
It's
far does
broad.
it go?
It's overextensive, yeah.
Yes, and under what circumstances, if you're being treated for some mental issues, not necessarily a full-blown schizophrenic, but something that's minor, should I be denied then if I am seeing someone by my choosing? Should you deny me that right if it's actually legal for me to have it?
Yeah.
Difficult place.
That's a little bit of a slippery slope. Now, another broad stroke question you asked is, you have the right to have the gun, you went through the permitting process to buy the gun, you have the gun in your house, and now your ex-wife who broke into your house accuses you of harassing her and goes and gets a restraining order. Do the police have the right to take your weapons from you?
Massachusetts absolutely have to surrender your weapons. In Rhode Island,
It's on the form.
it's on the form.
What form?
But then there was a concern about law enforcement officers, because if they're a law enforcement officer that's served with a restraining order, now you've taken
Right.
their ability to work,
To work.
away from them.
Right. The form is the
So,
order from the court.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And-
But it's automatic in Mass. You have
Yeah.
to surrender firearms and any other weapons.
Right.
Now you've,
In Rhode Island, they can order the person who the restraining order is against to turn over any weapons that he or she may have to the local police department.
yeah.
It certainly seems like there are loopholes on one side, whether it was the gun shows or even in these circumstances that you're discussing. There are slippery slopes, loopholes. It suggests that there certainly is room for careful revision, and with the sheer numbers that we're reading in Providence alone, that it must demand that. Now, can that actually happen without the NRA putting a lot more money in the city or the state to make sure that there isn't any greater restriction or any more permission required for someone to hold or carry or possess? Is that even within a discussable possibility right now?
I suppose anything's possible, but you always have that strong lobby, and it's like fighting City Hall.
Perhaps the Police Chiefs Association should be on the other side of that discussion
One of the
so that
good
it's a
things,
balanced approach.
One of the good things that they've started to do is the buyback program with the local cities and towns.
And that's the
offering
biggest
to
problem.
buy back the guns.
Is the
People
number of
surrender
guns
them.
just
Yeah.
on the street. So the more they can take off the street, theoretically, the safer people would be.
But as you say that, they may be guns that are lawfully owned and others that are illegally owned. But as many will say, if they change the laws, all that's going to do is require or promote someone going to the internet, hitting a few buttons, and in comes the next very large shipment from a foreign country. And they will be illegal, but they will be here. So just trying to round them up, collect them, and give someone a toy or $50 for it, in and of itself could be almost futile.
It might be, but the more you get off the street, theoretically, the safer the streets
And they
will
have
be.
been
Right.
getting a lot off the street. It's not going to cure the problem,
It's not.
but at least it's an effort to curtail
Right.
the possession of firearms.
Yeah, I guess admittedly, guns aren't driving it or preventing there being so many accidents, but there's certainly so much that's in the news right now. It seems that in the next maybe legislative session, there are going to be more people who are going to have something to say about it. We thank you for tuning in to this discussion. We thank once again Jackie Grasso and David Bazar from Audette Bazar Cadero Grasso law firm in East Providence. We hope that this topic has been helpful to you. This is their public outreach effort, and we hope that it's given you a few more insights into what's legal in your area and what questions perhaps you should ask going forward. We thank you for tuning in, and we thank you for watching. We hope you'll be with us in our next session as the discussion of legal matters continues.